What's going on, folks? It's Dr. Remy LeBeau, and I'm coming at you once again from the X-Lair to provide you my very deep and insightful reaction to the latest episode of Legion. This was Legion, Season 2, Episode 8, 9, 10, 11. We have 3 more episodes to go. It was only going to be 2 more, but fortunately they expanded the season to 11 episodes, even though what I think the situation was, and this is pure pure speculation on my part, that they actually planned a 2-hour finale, but then they decided, let's just chop it up into 2 episodes because it actually works better as 2 episodes. I would assume, regardless, like this was episode 8, and we have 9. We would have had 9, and then a 2-part 10, or maybe still do have a 2-part 10, just over a 2-week period, and so. This is the episode that bridges basically everything that's been happening to what is going to happen, right? What we knew was going to happen, like the climax, like that final sort of lead up to the battle for the body. Like who's going to get the body first, right? So this was a great way of sort of taking us from where we were, which was all the revelations about Lenny, the sister, all this stuff, and then David going into like his crazy kind of, mental escape through possible realities. Like all this stuff this episode finally brought us back to where we need to be in order to get us to the end, right? Like the story that's going on, the one that's driving the entire thing, the MacGuffin, the thing that everybody's chasing, the body. That is what's driving this whole season, right? And so we're back, and this was a really great. It felt really smooth to me, like kind of like this transition from like these really important but like really self-contained episodes, like self-contained in the sense that they were contained within their own ideas. Like there were certain ideas that were driving the episodes to now like having again like a sort of readjustment to the course, like a course correction, right, to get us back on track to where we're going. Really smooth. I think the show does such a great job of like telling a really simple story in the X-Men universe where there's mutants and there's really powerful forces both on the side of good and evil. Again, it's gray area territory that we're in right now because apparently David may or may not destroy the world and cause an apocalypse or whatnot. But we have yet to find out how all that's going to play out. I'm happy with the show. I'm happy with this episode. I can't wait for the last 3 episodes. It's going to be really sad when it's over, but I have a feeling we're in for a real fucking treat here. Because this episode was fucking great. So we started off in the in basically like the understanding that Ptolemy, and now I know his name, and it's not Ptolemy, it's Ptolemy. The P is not silent. I looked up his name finally in the IMDb. It's the memory dancer. The memory dancer, Ptolemy, is apparently dead, but his mind was transferred into a computer, a simulated reality where I guess you can transfer a person's consciousness into, that allowed him to figure out a couple of things. One, and really for us, the audience, he was able to figure out what is the origin of Admiral Fukuyama. We found out he was a mutant with the ability to heal himself, and it appears like the U.S. government lured him into a project where they turned him essentially into a man/computer. Like they wanted to create a mind that would be impenetrable by mind readers in a world where there are mutants now. And apparently they did it, and they put him in a really weird state, clearly, because then he winds up wearing the baskets, and then he winds up communicating with the world through the Vermillion, right? Who are also, I don't know, half dead, half alive, I don't know. But what's interesting about the Vermillion, I just found out when I was looking at IMDb, is that they're played by women, and I love how androgynous they are, because really they are coming off, I'd say about 51 to 55% masculine. So obviously there were breasts and there was sort of a feminine quality to the expression of any kind of communication from them, but overall the effect was masculine. So it was a really interesting. It's a really interesting way of representing gender, and I think it's a very appropriate to do so, to try to explore, well, what are other sort of versions of gender that can exist in the world, because it's part of our world. And there are people that run the spectrum of all sorts of cases other than male or female. And I mean, I'm gay, and there's people that are they teeter on a lot of labels, ultimately having none, or maybe specifically one that is universal. And so I don't know. I'm not familiar with all the labels these days, but nonetheless, like, it's good for the show to represent this, because it's good for people to get comfortable with the idea that there could be very androgynous people that maybe have a lot of both masculine and feminine features, and like they're just people as well, and we should just treat them as such. But that's not necessarily what the show is doing, because it is kind of making them an oddity. But nonetheless, I like that it's women playing these parts, and that the characters are coming off as masculine. It's a really interesting sort of effect and way to portray these robotic type of communication devices, really, for Admiral Fukuyama. But Ptolemy, who is now in the computer world as well, was able to control one of the Vermillion, which is really cool. And so by being able to control one of the Vermillion, then he was able to then communicate with David and tell him where the body of the Shadow King was, because that was one of the things that the episode started off sort of establishing, like, well, now that the monk is dead, how are we going to find the body? Oh, wait a minute. But Ptolemy is inside a computer world, and this monk was apparently in there as well, and he was connected to some wires, so he clearly was. And when he was in there, he took control of Fukuyama, and so he left some sort of memory of himself in that Matrix type environment, and then he allowed for Ptolemy to figure out where the body was, which solved the issue, gave David the information he needed, gave us a lot of information about Fukuyama, and as well as the reality that Ptolemy finds himself in. The fact that he is in this reality now, which is essentially the Matrix, and is really interesting. And is he going to remain in there? And is this part of like what he's going to be from now on, or can he get out? But also, I really love the way it's being represented with all the zeros and ones being projected everywhere, and it's sort of it feels like a computer-like environment, but clearly it's a very simulated environment that could be anything. Anyway, really love that stuff. David gets the info, and then he cracks a plan, right? He makes a plan. As he's doing the plan, we figure out that Farouk has also found his body. How? He tracked down the driver that drove his body to the place. She knew of him, she knew of his body, and which was actually, what's his name? The Oliver. Oliver then is able to figure out that, Oliver got sidetracked there for a second. I went on a lot of different branches in my mind. Coming back to where I was, so Oliver took the Shadow King there. The Shadow King created the endless dream for the driver, which is really cool. This dream of her just driving endlessly. I thought that was a really kind of beautiful and poetic thing. The fact that she is able to kind of just be this ideal world liver, like basically like she gets to live in her ideal world and doesn't have to deal with reality, and is sort of shut off from reality, but is still alive. I don't know. Interesting idea that Farouk was able to give that to her, an old woman who clearly was on her way out no matter what. Not that this is the end for her, but clearly she's still alive. But nonetheless, like, her reality was a very unpleasant one, seemingly. And this was a gift that he offered her, and she knew what she was doing by giving her the body, by giving him the body location. But like, um, she was willing to give it up, and she did, and that set him on the path to his body. And so we see David and Farouk kind of going through this desert, headed to the place where the body is, which apparently, by the way, this desert, part of it is that it doesn't have the normal rules of space and time, and that's something that happened as a result of the monks trying to protect the body, which is crazy if you think about it. Like the fact that like the monks were able to manipulate natural reality in such a way. Is that magic? Is that a mutant power? I don't know. Maybe we'll find out. Maybe we won't. But I love that that element exists there. Anyway, so I before I continue on with what actually happened in the desert, I love how they were representing the walking through the desert. It was very much a living comic book. I thought about it for a second. I was like, oh, these are comic book panels. This is what you would see on a comic book page, like someone going through the desert. You see them from different angles. You see really kind of cool shots of them in different framing. And it was beautiful, and like it had like kind of that electric music behind it. It was great, man. They're so good at everything they do. Everything is so important to them. Anyway, then we had the Sid element where Sid first is kind of revealing to us with that the burn dude that she doesn't trust David, and that things are not necessarily what they were, but nonetheless, like she wants to continue pursuing him. And so she takes off to go pursue him in a jet of some sort, and then she parachutes and she finds him in the desert, and then they get together, and then they have this a bit of a fight, and she's basically like, dude, I'm on your side, we're in love, let's go. I'm going with you, even if you are helping the Shadow King. Like it was clear that she had an idea that was going on, and people have an idea that's going on, but nonetheless, like she trusts him, and that's good. So anyway, they go about their business in the desert, and Al Farouk does as well. And eventually, David and Sid happen upon themselves that I believe must have been in some like alternate timeline in that space where they actually wound up dead. And so that, again, this is like this weird kind of temporal anomaly, spatial relations, off kilter space, and so it makes sense that they would maybe run into like alternate timeline versions of themselves that have died. Anyway, that's the moment where David basically there's an understanding, I think, developed in that moment that she doesn't 100% trust him, and that she hopes that he'll do the right thing in the end, or he'll do what she would expect him to do, maybe, but clearly there's a doubt that's been expressed, and that's important because that could ultimately be a fissure between them, and it could drive them apart, which is what Al Farouk would want. So we'll see how that plays out. Anyway, so David has been controlling people, right? So he's controlling, and not just people, telekinetically controlling the environment as well. He opened the door for Lenny, and he guided her out, and she left. And then he woke up the burn dude, and he was going to send the burn dude, and it started happening, and then Melanie knocks the burn dude out. Then we get this great sort of like rewind from Melanie's perspective to how she wound up doing that. And first of all, I mentioned last week that I felt that she was being sidelined this season, but clearly she was being saved as like a Trojan horse. And now she's like sabotaging David's plan under the control of the Shadow King. I love how they went back, and then it was like Oliver ultimately helping the Shadow King, but really being manipulated by the Shadow King to take control of Melanie. And then they do. And then we go through this weird kind of mental landscape dark hallway, and then the episode ends with like this weird creature with like it's like I don't know. It was a weird fucking creature. It had like some sort of weird animal skull. For a second, and I don't know how many of you would know this reference, but I thought maybe it's Predator X. So Predator X is like this genetically engineered hunter. That's basically like the animal version of a sentinel that needs to eat like mutated cells. So like it hunts like mutants. Predator X. But I believe in the comics, I think it's got adamantium in some way. Either I think it might be its bones. I don't know. There's adamantium involved, and so he's like really fucking fierce and a big threat. And so I thought about it, but it doesn't quite fit that. And maybe this is just like some weird demon in the land, in the mindscape, or in this weird kind of like space-time anomalous area that they are. Desert. Le Désolé is what they called it. The deserted, I think. The désolé, or désolé is sorry. Désolé is sorry in French. Is that what they said? Désolé? Because if they said désolé, then that's I'm sorry. So the desert of the sorry. But I thought it was more like desolate. It felt more like desolate, which is very on the nose, but I like it. The desolate. Anyway, so another great episode. We have 2 episodes before the finale. 9, 10, then the finale, 11. Is there going to be a 3rd season? I hope so. I haven't heard anything about a 3rd season yet, but maybe it's up in the air. I hope there's a 3rd season, because this stuff is really good. And the thing about it is that it's even better, I think, just binged. Like, once they have the full 11 episodes, like watching it all in 1 or 2 sittings, I think is going to be really dope. Because it's really going to all kind of flow, even with like its weird kind of ebbs and kind of tangential excursions. Ultimately, there's a big flow to the season, and I think it's going to be really appreciated altogether. But nonetheless, I'm really enjoying it right now, so can't wait for the end. Anyway, thanks for checking out my video. Thanks for checking out my channel. If you like what you saw, click a like. If you don't like what you saw, click a don't like. Whatever. You don't have to like it. I understand. Everybody likes everything or everyone. But if you would like to, because you did like this video, keep up with me and the subsequent videos that I'll be offering, well, there's a little button down there. It says subscribe. Just click on that, and you'll be able to keep up with the latest videos from the X-Lair. Anyway, as always, I want to remind you that if you have the option to put an X in the box, you should, because ain't nobody checking me, folks. Take care. Bye-bye.